Genshin is only one in a long line of games produced by HoYoverse. Before Genshin was released, their most popular franchise was Honkai. There are technically 5 games in the series, but from what I could gather, you can't actually play the first 3 games anymore. That leaves us with only 2 true Honkai games left, Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Star Rail. Not to flex too hard, but I was invited to the launch of Honkai Star Rail last year, and being there made me feel like I should probably start paying attention to Honkai a little more. After all, Honkai is essentially Genshin's older, cooler sibling, and it can probably fill in some lore gaps where Genshin can't by itself. I'm sure the majority of you know this, but in case you don't, Genshin is heavily implied to take place in the same universe as Honkai. If the characters' matching names and appearances don't do it for you, then look at this Honkai Impact event where Fischl and Kuching appeared in-game. That was pretty early in Genshin's development too, so this was seemingly always the plan. A while ago I tried to get into Honkai Impact in hopes of furthering my understanding of Genshin lore, but I just couldn't get used to the gameplay, so I never made it very far. Honkai Star Rail, on the other hand, has much more enjoyable gameplay, so I got a bit more attached to this one. I'm still not entirely caught up on the main story, but I have a decent idea of what's gone on and what the world is like. I know all this Honkai talk is probably scaring a lot of you. This isn't the game you came here for, and I get that. But I fear that we have no choice but to look outwards when it comes to certain things in Teyvat. How many times have we come across something completely unexplainable and grasped at straws? I think I found an extremely reliable straw to grab at this time, though. Let's talk about how Fontaine's Archon quests ended. The final boss fight was against the all-devouring Narwhal, which is exactly what it sounds like. There are quite a few notable things to point out with this boss fight. For one, it takes place in the Starry Void we've seen a handful of times throughout the game. I typically assume this area is the Abyss, but I doubt that's what it is this time. Another striking detail is the visual motif of black holes. Black holes are technically invisible, so we're not 100% sure what they really look like except for a couple pictures, but this is generally what you'll see as an image of a black hole. The references to deep space don't stop there, however. In the original Chinese version, the all-devouring Narwhal is actually called the star-swallowing whale. All of its drops make references to real-world astrophysics, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's take a look at the descriptions of the all-devouring Narwhal and its domain, Shadow of Another World. The archive description goes on a tangent that seems unrelated at first, but has serious implications for Teyvat's early history. In the most fantastical stories or outrageous lies, the stars found in the depths of the cosmos might be teeming with life, much like Teyvat, and the universe itself is akin to an ocean. Realistically speaking, however, if a profound universe full of life exists, why hasn't any of that life made contact with Teyvat? Maybe the universe has been constantly trying to infiltrate Teyvat, or maybe a higher power created borders to protect this world. That last sentence is the big takeaway, I think. Not only is Teyvat an isolated outlier in a vast universe full of intelligent life, but someone is deliberately trying to keep these would-be infiltrators away. Obviously, their attempts were unsuccessful. The Traveler, their twin, and 3 Descenders got into Teyvat with no problem. I think it's interesting that we're hearing about this in the description of the all-devouring Narwhal as if it's not from this world either. Don't ask me if this thing is a Descender, okay? I have no idea. The description of the domain is even more harrowing. The behemoth that once devoured the birthing waters of the planet has departed without a single trace, but those in the know will forever live surely in the terrifying shadow of that omen of the end. A single shard of shattered space-time remains in this place, and through it you may perhaps be able to witness that titanic creature once more. If this means what I think it means, then every time you fight the all-devouring Narwhal, you're going back in time. I know that sounds crazy, but it would explain the mini-boss built into this boss fight. Typically around halfway through fighting the all-devouring Narwhal, the whale will swallow you and transport you to a different, albeit similar arena. Here you must defeat a shadow, which coincidentally looks very similar to Conrian enemies like shadowy husks or abyss lectors. If this boss fight is based around time travel, then when did this Narwhal get to Teyvat exactly? Its description says it devoured all the water that once encompassed Teyvat, which was presumably a very long time ago before humans were even created, yet we see a Conry in here? Either Conria existed way before we thought, or that shattered space-time has something to do with the inconsistency. After all, if we are traveling through unreliable space-time, I would imagine things would get messed up here and there. So the all-devouring Narwhal is a random gargantuan monster from outside Teyvat that can cause you to time travel. That's all fine and good. But why? Where did the Narwhal come from? What even is it? How is it able to manipulate time and space in such a way? I think the answers lie within Honkai Star Rail. Star Rail has 18 characters unseen and not fully understood by any of its others, called Aeons. These are mysterious yet powerful entities who preside over the universe. Some are benevolent while others seek to cause as much death and destruction as possible. Aeons are essentially the gods of Star Rail, although they're very different from the gods we see in Genshin. People can't even see Aeons. Imagine if Genshin gods were like that, I would cry. The Aeons must rigidly follow the path they represent. It is impossible for them to do otherwise. This phenomenon is called primum mobile. Aeons can die, but only if they are killed or absorbed by another. They are believed to exist in a higher dimension inaccessible by mortals. My first thought when I saw that all-devouring narwhal was that this thing has to be an Aeon. There are a few issues with that though. If the narwhal is an Aeon, it must be attached to a path. There are 3 Aeons in Star Rail whose appearances have yet to be seen, but their paths are Beauty, Finality, and Trailblaze. They all also already have names. I don't see any of that in the all-devouring narwhal. What I do see is a connection to space-time as a united concept. The drops I mentioned earlier all have references to real-life astrophysics concepts which have a lot to do with how space-time can bend. The first, Lightless Eye of the Maelstrom, is another black hole. Its description actually provides some real facts on black holes, like how they're extremely dense and massive, and how nothing can escape their event horizons or edges. The second, Lightless Mass, is overall unremarkable, but the last, Lightless Silk String, is an obvious reference to string theory in its name, design, and description. I won't go into too much detail on string theory because it's way too complicated and I don't want this video to be 50 hours, but I will explain the basics. String theory posits that instead of everything being made of subatomic particles, these particles are stretched out into vibrating strings. In most versions of string theory, the fundamental building blocks of the universe are open and closed strings. The entire model is based around how the strings interact with each other, and because an open string is open, you would assume it has more influence. However, open strings are said to have their ends attached to hypothetical extended objects called D-branes. In short, you do not want to be an open string because you're stuck to a D-brane, while closed strings are the ones that get to move around freely. Remember how Aeons can only act in a certain way and can never deviate from their paths? I think the Aeons are forever confined to their respective strings, which would explain certain things about them. We can't see them because they're not physical beings. They're sentient concepts who exist within these strings. The Star Rail databank even says that they're just embodiments of philosophical concepts. It also says, if anyone finds themselves treading on the path of an Aeon, they will be inundated by a distant sensation, like being struck by a gaze from light years across the cosmos. Many believe that this is the only connection that Aeons and mortals can ever have. That's pretty telling, I think. If you're on an Aeon string, it's gonna feel like they're watching you, but they're actually not. They can't. This would also explain why Aeons are so elusive to mortals. They exist on a higher dimensional plane. This is already confirmed to be true of the Aeons, and in string theory, dimensions go all the way past our typical 3 up to 10, 11, or even 26 in some versions. So where does this leave us with the all-devouring narwhal? If this whale really is an Aeon forever trapped in its high-dimension string, how is it visible, and how are we able to interact with it? As I mentioned before, there's some shattered space-time around the narwhal, whatever that means. Strings are an integral part of space-time, so if the space-time is ruined, then the strings there should be too. Maybe its strings somehow got pushed into this lower dimension, and we can now see and interact with the all-devouring narwhal's physical body because of that. Alternatively, the narwhal string is in our possession now, and maybe that gives us the power to control it. The lightless silk string is described as a slender strand that somehow ended up entangled on your weapon while fighting the all-devouring narwhal. Now that we have the string it's attached to, it really can't function as an Aeon, and since it's stuck in some broken space-time, it might as well be in purgatory at this point. I only have one more question to answer for myself. If the all-devouring narwhal was an Aeon, what was its path? Was it space-time? Just time by itself? If it's just time, then that opens a huge can of worms for Istaroth and the Primordial One. Like, what came first, the Aeon of Time or the God of Time? But I'm getting ahead of myself, as I often do. I've made other theories based on Honkai lore before, but they were all super wrong because I just wasn't that familiar with Honkai Impact. But I've been playing Star Rail a lot lately, and I feel more confident about this one. Besides, it's not like anyone else is really worrying about what that stupid whale is, so I might as well try something. Guys, I can't believe we're finally getting playable Cloud Retainer, human Cloud Retainer. She's so beautiful. My old school Genshin fans will remember when we thought that Shenhe was gonna be the human Cloud Retainer. Good times. Classic times. Also, I just started a second channel not too long ago, so please go check that out. I just uploaded a new video over there, so the link is in the top of the description. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.